I had to miss Freedom Fest, and you had a great time at Freedom Fest. There was other controversy, I guess, swirling around about the event, and I saw this online. The Southern Poverty Law Center, which for those who don't know, is an old organization. It's often billed itself as like a human rights organization, and I'm not as familiar with their historic work as I would be, say, the ACLU's. And I think that's because one reason, which is that the Southern Poverty Law Center fell off the grid a while back, like long before I got into politics. They really have kind of trended not only just very far left, but like towards almost being a hate group themselves, right? Like they
like
are
a
not
partisan witch hunt smear factory, unfortunately.
Yes. Like they're not seen credibly. They don't really do any work. I've never seen them at a state legislature. I'm not joking. I've done lots of human rights legislation and policy work. I know the groups on the left that are at least doing the work. I've never seen them. I've never met anybody doing the work with them. Like, where are you? So I really don't know what the point of them is, but they regularly do just smear people and basically make lists of people who are quote.
Well, apparently the point of them is to go after people like Andrew Yang, who is pretty progressive, ran for the 2020 Democratic presidential nominee, for like daring to inhale the same air as right-wing people. So Freedom Fest, for folks that don't know, it's a really diverse group. You've got libertarians from the Libertarian Party, liberty conservatives, MAGA Republicans, classical conservatives, and yeah, a few fringe figures here and there like you have at any convention. And you also have some liberals and progressives like Andrew Yang. He came to speak to the convention about his project, the Forward Party, which I don't know a whole lot about, but I think it seeks to cross the ideological and partisan divide to focus on some like common sense solutions, he says, like term limits to our political system. And he came to outreach to the right and speak at this conference, which seems to me like a good thing, something that should be applauded. But to the Southern Poverty Law Center, they decided to smear him, putting out a Hatewatch article report. The former Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang will speak at the 2022 Freedom Fest, which will feature far-right libertarians with ties to white nationalists and anti-Semites. And this whole thing, it's like got this image graphic that's all dystopian, scary looking. It makes it sound like Andrew Yang, who is not white and is not even like conservative really in most ways, is somehow this far-right extremist or something. And it goes on, you know, we can talk about the details of the article or whatever, but I just thought it was such a bad faith smear job, really. And it's like, this is what you're spending your time doing?
Well, yeah, and I just want to say, like, for people who aren't familiar with Freedom Fest, I want to kind of, I've been through the ringer on these things, okay? Like, I've worked in Republican politics for a long time. I've been to just about every conference there is, and I will say some of them, I'm not going to name drop, but some of them have become quite fringy in recent years in the Trump era, have become places like, there's one large one that I quit going to 2 years ago because it got to be so Trumpy and just fringy and like weird. And I was like, this isn't where I want to be seen. And I don't feel like these are the people I'm trying to reach. And so I cut ties. Freedom Fest is not that. I would say that they are.
It had an open borders panel.
Yeah. Like it's the one big conference, I would say, like that has stayed very, very mainstream. And while I wasn't able to be there this year, I remember last year in South Dakota, you and I talked about like, this is actually a really great mix of people because it actually trends more libertarian, liberty friendly than other right-leaning conferences. Like you'll find a lot more libertarians at this conference speaking than you would at others. But also like it's got kind of a big tent feel where like there really is sort of like a little mix of everybody on the right wing kind of umbrella. And it's something that I think has stayed pretty far away from the like overtly MAGA kind of dialogue that you find throughout a lot of the GOP. It's not that. And so for them to smear Freedom Fest in general and the vast diversity that you find there and to try to lump everybody there, because that's what the piece did. Like it attacked Andrew Yang, but it tried to attack him by like associating with the people at Freedom Fest, which was just outrageous to me because I think it's a very prestigious conference.
Not even the people at Freedom Fest. What they do in the article was Freedom Fest has hundreds of speakers, like 200 plus. They cherry picked like 3 who have libertarian podcasters who have in the past at other events associated or spoken with other people who weren't at Freedom Fest who have objectionable views in the views of the SPLC. And in some cases, I think kind of objectively distasteful views. We can talk about that. But it wasn't even he's appearing alongside these extremists, or there was a little bit of that, but it was actually like multiple degrees of guilt by association. Andrew Yang is speaking at a conference where there are a few other speakers out of hundreds that he's not even speaking alongside, who have in other settings associated with third parties who aren't even there, who have said bad things. That's the logic they used to smear Andrew Yang and smear some of these podcasters. I mean, because just having associated with somebody once or twice in a different context doesn't mean you're the same as them, or you adopt all their views, but it especially doesn't mean that somebody who just appears at the same conference as you is therefore associated with everyone you've ever associated with and the worst things they've ever said. It's just bat crazy logic, and I think it's just bad faith, partisan smear job, honestly.
I saw somebody on Twitter call it 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon kind of smearing, and I was like, that's exactly what it is. And if you're going to use that kind of logic, like who could appear at any convention or any conference? Because anywhere I go, there's going to be people who are appearing there who I don't agree with, or who've appeared with other people I don't agree with. And like, that is why it was so ridiculous. You know, I think when you want to talk about like associations of people, I think that it could be more fair to say, you know, somebody associated with this person or platformed them or brought them on their show, and that's a problem, or this is somebody who's a white supremacist, and like to say something about that interaction. But what they did is take it a step back and say, because none of those actual white supremacists or alt-right people were actually appearing at FreedomFest, right?
Nick Fuentes was banned from FreedomFest because he is a white supremacist and extremist and calls for violence and is a trash human being. I try not to bash people as people, but this dude, look him up, genuinely terrible.
No, don't look him up. He's a trash can. But yeah. Like, but as a whole, like, that's exactly right. Like, Freedom Fest didn't feature, there was nobody they could even point to as saying this person's appearing at Freedom Fest and Andrew Yang is appearing next to them. They had to go like degrees out. And it's like, I mean, good grief. Like, how hard were you digging to find something to criticize Andrew Yang for appearing at this event? And it was just really ridiculous because, again, Freedom Fest not only had diversity of thought, but it was actually a really diverse conference. Like, they had Jewish people speaking, they had Black people speaking, they had people who were immigrants speaking. I mean, it spans the gap. Like, this is not some kind of like fringy white nationalist conference, and that's basically how they tried to paint it. So they look like a joke. This is why no one takes them seriously whatsoever. But I actually think this brought up something. You and I were having a conversation that I want to bring onto the podcast because I think it's important, and this is actually something I care very, very deeply about, which is that, you know, when we get into these like bad figures, people who are literally white supremacists, who are, you know, alt-right white nationalists.
We don't throw that around lightly.
No, and I don't throw it around that. I mean, like, verifiably, this is what these people think. This is what they stand for. I think there's a debate in the liberty movement that's sort of raging right now, where people say, you know, you need free speech and you need to be able to have outreach and conversations with people you disagree with. And I do agree with that. But the way I would approach that is to do it privately, because I'm a big believer that you can change these people, right? I think most of the people who get caught up in these very hateful ideologies are sad people. I think hurt people want to hurt people. I think most of them have a lot of trauma in their backgrounds. They're people who feel very pushed around by life, and they're clinging to hate to make them feel better. And I've done a lot of research around this. I've actually really thought about it very deeply, because I think that if you want to see people exit those ideologies, if you want to see them have a change of heart, you have to do outreach. You can't just cancel them. That just entrenches them in that hateful ideology and pushes them further into the fringes. You have to be able to do outreach, and we've seen some really beautiful examples of people doing that. And I just want to point people to the work of a man named Daryl Davis, who's a Black man, and he has throughout his life consistently made it a goal to reach out to people who were literally in the Ku Klux Klan. Like, not just like, you know, maybe they have racist views. These are overt racist, and he sits down with them and he works to form relationships with them. And there's this really beautiful piece in Desert News kind of describing his work, and he basically keeps like a closet with like their robes, basically, that they've turned them in, of over 60 people that he has helped change out of this ideology. And like one of them was even like from a very prominent family who would, I think the Dukes family maybe, that had actually like been a leader in the Klan, and was able to like change these people's hearts and minds because he did that kind of basic human outreach and dialogue. But I think there's a difference in doing that versus platforming people and inviting them onto your show or appearing with them publicly, because I think that sort of action gives credibility to their work, gives them the attention that they're seeking oftentimes. And I think there's a difference in sitting down and talking to people who are caught up in these ideologies versus people like Nick Fuentes, who are grifters, who are making money off of violence and hate, and who literally will probably never change because this is their money and this is where they get the attention they so desperately want. And they probably don't even really believe half of what they're saying. They're just grifting off of it and causing hate and violence in the society instead. And so I think that there's a line there, and I feel like there's some people in our movement are not towing it correctly, right? Like there's all the difference in the world in those kinds of activities. So we need to work to try to bring people out of these ideologies. We need to have conversations with people who disagree with us, but we don't have to do it in a way where we platform them or give them attention or in any way uplift their views or take them to a new audience.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think where I land on it is that I disagree with the Southern Poverty Law Center's attempt to essentially tar the mentioned podcasters with the worst views of the people they've spoken to on a few occasions. Like, I don't think it means they are therefore as bad as those people or the same things as those people. I don't think it means you're a bad person, but I do think the actual decision to, have a long form conversation or take a photo op with somebody like Nick Fuentes is the wrong decision. I think it's a bad call as a matter of morality, practicality, and prudence, because Nick Fuentes is not an honest, good faith actor in any way, shape, or form. I mean, this is a guy who just peddles grotesque smears and lies, panders for attention, foments violence, and he's clearly just sold out, right? He's not reachable. An everyday person caught up, like I would talk to one of his audience members, but I would not talk to him because I'm not going to legitimize a crazy person who's a bad faith actor and prop them up and promote them. And I want to make it very clear that that is not what libertarianism, in the way that I subscribe to it, is in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I think it's very contra to the ideal. So I disagree with these folks' decisions that they've made in the past to talk to some of these people. And it's not about free speech, right? No one's calling for them to be locked up or I'm not calling for them to have their free speech violated. I'm saying I will never associate with them, and I don't think other people should either. But I don't think that means that they're terrible people because they associated with somebody once. I just disagree with that decision. So I think the whole SPLC thing is a smear. It is kind of guilt by association, but then it's even more ridiculous applied to someone like Andrew Yang. It's already pretty ridiculous in its premise, and they're not a good faith actor, but it's really ridiculous applied by like multiple guilt by association, which is what they tried to do to Andrew Yang. And I'm just sick of it. We need to encourage dialogue, not with literally anyone, but going into the lion's den like he did and talked about democracy in a crowd where a lot of the people think the elections are stolen and rigged. We need to encourage more of that. My friend Isaac Saul over at Tangle News, he went to FreedomFest, and he's kind of, I would say, centrist. Like, he's a pretty straight down the middle kind of journalist type, but he's definitely not a conservative or a libertarian. And he went to FreedomFest to debate whether the election was stolen or not, and he believes it isn't, and he's done extensive coverage fact-checking these claims, and he debated a right-wing radio host who thinks the election was stolen, again, and robbed from Trump, in front of this audience that mostly booed him. But you know what? He deserves credit for doing that, not condemnation. That would be like saying he's associated with election deniers when he's literally one of the most prominent journalists debunking kind of fraud conspiracies and such because he appeared on a stage with somebody or at the same event as someone. I think it's just terrible logic that stops us from having any sort of productive political discourse. And I'm really sad to see what the Southern Poverty Law Center has become because, I don't know a ton about their history, but from what I understand, decades ago, they were kind of a venerable institution in the civil rights movement. But now they've just become a smear job, a partisan Democratic Party front group, and it for the establishment. And it's a real shame.
Yeah, I think that as a whole, that too many people on the left don't want to have any room for views outside of their own to be aired, to be discussed, and they want to just totally shut down anybody who disagrees with them as racist, as as problematic. And again, the problem with that is not only is that unhealthy for a society and for a democracy, but then it also takes the sting out of it when you actually do label real racist as racist, because there are people out there who are actually pushing violence, who do hate people because of their skin color, because of other immutable characteristics about themselves. And you and I are very careful in how we go about labeling those people and those situations, and are really intentional about being precise about that and not exaggerative, because it matters, and people should stand against those ideologies and people who hold to them, and they should fight back against them, and they should seek to debate them and to win in the idea of in the marketplace of ideas. But as a whole, like, you still don't want to just shut down people and say you don't even get to participate in society because I disagree with your views. And that's kind of where they want to go. And again, it's really a short-sighted thing, because it keeps people from believing it when there's real racism. It's like the boy who cried wolf. And it keeps people from really feeling as compelled to take action against things like that. And it makes it muddies the waters, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It makes it very confusing for the average person to be able to tell, like, what actually is racism and what isn't. And so I think that that's a huge issue, and it's an unfortunate evolution we see happening in our political system over time. So again, I think where Brad and I fall is we should always try to do outreach to people we disagree with, especially people who are part of hateful ideologies, and we should seek to try to change their minds and be willing to go into the lion's den. But we also don't have to platform them or bring them onto our show or give them any kind of credibility in the process. So I think that's the proper way to approach these things. And I think Andrew Yang has done a great job, and hope that we can continue to strive to meet that standard too.